Alright guys, welcome back to the Illegal Shift NFL podcast. Now, I was expecting this NFL draft to be just absolutely insane with the trades and big name players shuffling around. You had half of the Eagles on the trading block. You had a bunch of teams trying to get up to the number 2 pick to get Marcus Mariota. We could have seen future Hall of Fame quarterbacks flying around. You never know what you're going to expect from this draft, and we certainly had high expectations. And nothing happened. At all. No big trades in the first round. You had a couple where, like, the Chargers moved up 2 spots, and you didn't really have too much going on there. So, in that regard, it was slightly disappointing. I mean, the Titans, they do take Marcus Mariota. They're sticking with him. Phillip Rivers isn't going anywhere. You know, Chip Kelly didn't get his guy. You're going to make, everyone's going to make big deals about that. But at the end of the day, that's just something that happens. If you expect something in most things, the NFL, whatever it may be, it's usually not going to go that way. Overall, though, with the draft, I think this is the first year where I can look at most teams' drafts and think, yeah, they did a pretty good job. I did a little list here, and out of the 32 teams, I only really think 10 of them didn't help themselves to get better. So that's everyone else. The other 22 teams getting better. And that includes teams like the Redskins, who I thought got a lot better. The Rams, I thought, got better. These are teams that usually don't have very good drafts. And there's other teams I'm doing, what we're going to do in a few moments is I'm going to go through my 5 teams that got better during the draft and 5 teams who didn't. So, on that teams that got better, you're going to notice quite a few teams that are up in that top 10 area. And as far as teams that didn't, they didn't make that list, but one of the drafts I didn't like that much was the Eagles. I just didn't like the players they took. It's not about, I have to factor in the fact that they were presumably going to go up and get their hands on Marcus Mariota. That didn't fall through. You can only grade them so hard for that because they were the one in control. But I wasn't, I like their first round pick. Their second round pick is okay, but how much are they going to throw at the secondary? Out of, 6 picks they had, 3 of them are cornerbacks. After spending money on cornerback in free agency. And otherwise, a defensive end in the 7th round, so he won't be he won't be a factor. And then they got an inside linebacker when they've already got 3 inside right now. And you can talk about Michael Kendricks being on the trade block. He didn't get traded. He wasn't going to get traded after they got to the 3rd round where they took the next inside linebacker. Maybe they're ramping up for the future. Maybe it's a value pick. But it still just doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's what I found interesting about this year's draft. Again, I can flip through sort of afterwards the other teams I thought did well and didn't do well. But it's sort of surprising. I can look at a team with a glaring need that they did not address and still think they pulled through with a pretty decent draft. I thought the Chiefs had a pretty good draft, which is pretty remarkable considering they didn't draft a wide receiver until the 3rd round. But overall, I think they had a good draft. I think the Cardinals had a pretty good draft, even though they didn't really address running back until the later rounds. But you never know with this. They draft a guy in the 3rd round at running back who very well could be carry the load for him. You never know. Obviously, most of these teams needed a quarterback, and none of them really addressed it because you had 2 quarterbacks go in the 1st round, none in the 2nd, and 2 in the 3rd round, both of which you gotta figure are going to be either long-term projects or, in the case of the Rams, I think theirs was just a waste of a pick. And I don't understand how McCanyon goes before Bryce Petty and Hundley, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I don't like the Saints draft that much because I don't understand in the third round why you're taking a quarterback unless you're really sure that Garrett Grayson is the best out of this draft and Drew Brees is going to be gone in a year or two. That has to be it. You have to sort of see the writing on the wall there. I think that Drew Brees could easily play another 3 or 4, honestly. He's not a mobile quarterback. He sits in the pocket, and as long as you put a good offensive line in front of him, he'll be fine. So, there were a lot of teams that I did like. So, yeah, again, after this is done, I will list through the teams and tell you whether I liked what they did and whether I didn't. Just so, I mean, I'm only going over 10 teams here. If one of your teams to make that list, I'm guessing you'd at least want to know what my opinion of their draft was. I probably won't go into very much detail in those. I'll probably just list them off real quick. And if you didn't check it out, if you want more detail about individual picks for at least the first 3 rounds, you can head over to illegalshift.com, or illegalshiftnfl.com. I still keep forgetting I have to throw the NFL at the end of that one. But illegalshiftnfl.com, and you can follow. It'll be the newest article there. I don't have it updated completely yet. It's a lot of work going into that, and I've been busy. But if you click on there, you'll get a link to my Tumblr site, which I believe is illegalshiftis.tumblr.com. Let me double check that for you real quick. Nope, that wasn't the link in any way, shape, or form. It is 2015 NFL Draft is.tumblr.com. If you head there, and I'll put a link to all this stuff in the description, you can read all of my reactions, my live reactions, for each of the picks in the first 3 rounds. I would have gone through and done the 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th rounds, but it's pretty exhausting, and I went to go see The Avengers 2. It was a really good movie. A little bit more exciting than the draft, I'd say, which is a shame this year. But let's go through, and let's start with the bad. Right? Get the bad news first, get it out of the way, and then we'll go up to the teams that I think got better. And a lot of these teams, the teams that got better are teams that I think improve by, you think have a chance to improve by about 3 games at least. Although, the team I have at the number 5 spot, I don't see that happening just because of how good their record was last season, but they still got significantly better and should keep themselves in position. But the teams that didn't get better, teams that had needs that they needed to address and didn't. Now, I understand the best player available philosophy, which is great when you're the Green Bay Packers and you can afford to do that, or you're the New England Patriots, or you have this team built up. But while you're building your team, you have to go out and get what you need. You can't just, I mean, you'll see it with my number 2 pick here, but you can't just take your first pick and go for value at one of the few positions you have depth at that you're not concerned with. I don't understand that. So, teams that didn't get better. Number 5 for me are the Tennessee Titans. I understand they went out and grabbed Marcus Mariota. I love the Dorial Green-Beckham pick in the 2nd round. I thought that was good value. And I think he can be a real contributor for them if he can keep himself on the field. That's a big if. They went and got offensive line help, defensive line help. They grabbed the fullback in the 4th round, but then grabbed the running back after that, which I don't understand. And then you figure everyone else, I mean, the running back might not be a factor, but they're so depleted that position that a 5th rounder could become the starter by midseason. But the reason why I don't like their draft, while everything else is good, is I really think they swung and missed on Marcus Mariota. I think both of these quarterbacks in this draft I think every quarterback has a chance to be out of the league in 5 years. I don't believe in any of these guys. Jameis Winston has the best shot out of these guys. Marcus Mariota might be a great guy, but I'm not 100% sold on any quarterback coming out of Oregon. And you could say, oh, he's different this, he's different that. I'm not blaming it on the system. I'm just blaming generally what happened. Joey Harrington was a bust, and he had nothing to do with Chip Kelly. So I'm not sold on him, and I'm not sold on the team he has around him. I think Jameis Winston has a better chance because he's got some good receivers in Tampa Bay, and their offensive line was terrible, but they've got a defensive leader there too. The Titans, yeah, sure, they have Jarrell Casey, but not really much else going on that defense. And their offensive line, oof. I don't wish that on any quarterback. So I really think the Titans made some good picks, but overall, why wouldn't you trade Marcus Mariota? I don't care where you're sending him to. You get that number 2 pick, you're going to stockpile. I would have flipped that for Phillip Rivers in a heartbeat. I'm not sold on Sam Bradford, but with that kind of haul, at least for me, I would have passed on Mariota and just gone after Bryce Petty and rode out the Zach Mettenberger train. That's honestly what I would have done. And added more to the rest of the team because that's what you need. You don't go into the top 5 picks without needing more help along every other position. That's just not what happens. So I would have flipped that for the bounty and worried about the quarterback later. But that's just my opinion. If you really think Marcus Mariota is a guy who can lead your franchise for 10 to 15 years, then you take him and you say screw it to the talent. You saw it with Blake Bortles last season. If your team is that bad, you're literally throwing your quarterback to the wolves there. I mean, Derek Carr came out okay, but he had a halfway decent line in front of him. And even then, he wasn't outstanding. He wasn't make the Pro Bowl numbers. He was just sort of, good for a rookie. You know, Teddy Bridgewater had a pretty good year last year, but his offensive line sucked, and he had to rely on guys like Matt Asiata to be his running back. And no wide receivers really to help him out that much. So I think the Titans have just taken Marcus Mariota, a guy who needs time to develop, and are going to throw him to the wolves. And I don't trust Ken Wisenhunt to develop any quarterback ever. I think he can help talented quarterbacks after they've already been groomed, but I don't think he can be the guy to groom them. So that I really think they should have just made that trade. At number 4, for the teams that didn't get better, would be the Indianapolis Colts. And this comes down simply to, I get it, you have Andrew Luck. He doesn't need more wide receivers. He just went out and got Andre Johnson. He still got T.Y. Hilton. Grab a wide receiver later in the draft I don't understand. You could use offensive line help. You need help every position in the defense. And generally the rest of it, they mostly pick from the defense. They grabbed the running back in the 6th round and a guard with their 7th round pick. But otherwise, all defense. So at least that went well. No 2nd round pick. They traded back. They had the 1st pick in the 2nd round. Or in the 3rd round, rather. So I guess they get a better deal on the contracts. But you grab a corner, you grab a DN, you grab a safety, but you grab a wide receiver. Why would you do that? I don't understand that at all. I forgot his name. Who's the one who fell to the Patriots? Malcolm Brown. He's sitting there on the board. Why wouldn't you grab him? Why wouldn't you take the risk on Randy Gregory? This just keeps going back to, I don't think the Colts have a very good general manager. I think they just got lucky with Andrew Luck. And no pun intended. And I think after that, they haven't done a good job putting a good team around him. I've made this point before. Andrew Luck is carrying this team on his back. Give him some help. Peyton Manning didn't go to the Super Bowl until he had consistent help around him, and he had Tony Dungy at head coach. I don't know. We'd like to think the Colts have a good head coach, but maybe they actually don't. Maybe Chuck Pagano is a little overrated. I don't know. I'm not 100% certain, but their general manager isn't very good, and their owner is an idiot, so they don't really have that much going for them. The number 3 team that did not get better, and if the other 2 teams didn't do so much worse, they would have been way higher, but the Carolina Panthers. Shaq Thompson. Why are you taking Shaq Thompson with your 1st round pick? I don't understand that. If you think he's a good player, that's fine, but you don't need a linebacker, and there was better safety options out there than converting Shaq Thompson. You had Collins still sitting on the board. Why would you take Shaq Thompson? And then have the guy he possibly will be replacing announce the pick. That's just awkward, and I don't understand it. Their 2nd round pick, I understand you need another wide receiving option to go with Kelvin Benjamin. But again, then we get to the 3rd pick of the 4th round when they take an offensive tackle. There were better offensive tackles on the board. And again, I said this as a joke. When I did the mock draft, the joking mock draft, I made a crack about how they thought they were all set at tackle with Michael Orr and Jonathan Martin. I didn't think they really were. And now, Michael Orr is going to be their starting left tackle. Did you just watch The Blind Side and not any NFL tape? I get it. It's a great story. I love the Michael Orr story. I love The Blind Side. But he hasn't been a very good tackle in the NFL. As much as everybody was rooting for him, it just hasn't worked out for him. And it's unfortunate. It's not the Hollywood ending you would have wanted. But you can't just think that he's going to do better. And Jonathan Martin, I feel bad for the guy, the whole bullying thing. You can't have him as either your starting tackle, not even, I don't understand. I don't get it. Did they hire Russ Grimm and I wasn't paying attention? Did the guy from the Patriots who retired last year come back? And I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand why he wouldn't take a tackle. Seriously, teams with the biggest needs. Panthers, tackle. It was up there. It was easily in the top 3. I mean, once you factor out all the teams that needed quarterback when you're just going to other positions, Panthers and tackle, offensive line in general, they were top 3 in the league of a need position. When you have that big of a need, when you have Cam Newton back there, you reach, you take the tackle, and you just get him. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about what Mel Kiper is going to give you for a grade. Go for your needs. You won your division because it was terrible. You won it at 7-8-1. 7-8-1 got you the division title. That doesn't make you a good team. That just made you lucky. Get your needs. Treat yourself like you are exactly what you are, a bottom half team in this league. The number 2 team, who I did not like, and I alluded to this a bit earlier, is my Buffalo Bills. Very simply, they don't have a lot of needs unless you were going to... I mean, I was rooting for Bryce Petty, and actually with their second pick, or their first pick, which was a second rounder, I was kind of hoping they'd take a shot at Randy Gregory just to put him in that defense. It would have been exciting to watch. It was a, big hope. I knew it was going to actually happen, but your first pick in the draft after trading away your first rounder to get Sammy Watkins last year, Ronald Darby, the cornerback from Florida State, who was involved in a hit and run last year, or whatever it was. And I get it, he's a good corner. I understand the thought process. This is what irritates me. Oh, we drafted because he's the best player available. You still have a crummy offensive line. You still need another outside linebacker. And you need a quarterback. And there are 3 potential good ones on the board right now. You took Ronald Darby. Because next year, you're probably going to cut Leotis McKelvin. And I understand that draft process. But that's if you see Ronald Darby in the 3rd or 4th round and you have a 2nd round grade on him. That's not, we think he would have gone in the first 5 picks of the 2nd round and he was still sitting there. No, you draft for need. That's why the Bills, the Titans, the Jaguars, these teams are consistently sitting at the bottom of the barrel. A couple of those teams did better, but they're consistently at the bottom of the barrel in this league. Now, their 3rd round pick I like. They went out and they drafted themselves a guard. They needed a guard. This guy's probably going to start. Their 5th round pick, running back. Why? Why? You got 4 on the roster already. You got 4 pretty good ones. You got LaShawn McCoy. You got Fred Jackson, who everyone's already concerned whether or not he's going to get any carries. You got Bryce Brown, and you got Boobie Dixon. You've got running backs. You don't need another one. I don't understand. They get an outside linebacker in the 6th round. They get another tight end in the 6th round. Tight end who they can hopefully bring up and develop. Cool. And they grab a wide receiver in the 7th round, I'm assuming, to just be a special teamer. I don't like this draft outside of what they did with their 3rd round pick and their 6th round picks. But again, the 6th round picks are fringe roster guys, let alone starters. And the number 1 team that I didn't like their draft, and this is by leaps and bounds, and this was a running joke while I was doing the live blog, is the Cleveland Browns. I love their first pick. Getting Danny Shelton with that terrible line is awesome. But then they take a center with their other first rounder. Again, I get it. Alex Mack might be gone next year. If he has a good season, he'll opt out of his contract and be gone and go get more money elsewhere, and you're probably not going to match him. I understand. And maybe you can swing him to guard. Terrific. You don't have a wide receiver. You are starting Brian Hartline and Dwayne Bowe, neither of which are good wide receivers. They should be your third or fourth receiver at best, not your 1 and 2 options. I don't understand it. Nate Orchard, they get an outside linebacker. They already had an abundance of outside linebackers. I guess they want their depth back. But again, your second round pick, you're drafting for depth, not need. Third round pick, you draft a running back. You've got 2 guys just coming off their rookie campaigns. You're building into this offensive line, and you're trying to get that going in because the offensive line is what carried your running game, and it went downhill after Alex Mack got injured. You don't need another running back. You don't need to have this entire giant staple. You grab another defensive tackle with your next third-round pick. I don't understand it. You grab a safety with your fourth-round pick. And then finally, with the 24th pick in the 4th round, you grab a wide receiver. What? Why? Why is that what you did? Why was that your decision? A lot of people like to knock the Bills and say they did a pretty bad draft, but oh my god, like the Browns, like when I go back to what the Panthers and their need at tackle, the team with the biggest need of any position outside of quarterback of any team was the Cleveland Browns. I'm assuming they're just not going to pass the ball next year because they know they have Josh McCown. That is the only way this draft makes any logical sense, is they're going to have less than 50 pass attempts throughout 16 weeks. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that's not what is going to happen. Oh, I wish they don't have it listed by position. Now let's see, what wide receiver? Okay, you missed on Cooper, you missed on Kevin White, you weren't going to get them. Cool. You passed on Devontae Parker. You passed on Nelson Aguilar. Let's see, you passed on Brashard Perryman. You passed on Philip Dorsett. You honestly would have done the Colts favor if you had taken him. Let's see, second round, who could you have taken? There's one that ticks me off, and I'll talk about him a bit more later. You know, let's see, what do you got? You got Dorial Green-Beckham. I get you don't want to spend a first rounder on him, that's fine. Devin Funchess. Okay, you know, maybe you didn't want to take it on him because you got to kind of take a flyer. You skipped on... Let's see. No, that's it for second round. Did anyone else go? No? Okay. Third round. I already know the player I'm going to because I thought he would be a first rounder. Okay, you skipped on Tyler Lockett. You skipped out, but the big one here, Jalen Strong. You could have easily gotten him at 19. I thought that's where he probably would have gone. He goes all the way to the beginning of the third round. Which means, I get it. You definitely take Danny Shelton in that spot, especially with this deep of a receiver class. But you skipped out on Jalen Strong twice when you could have gotten him. And that's going to bite them in the ass. Let's see, who else? Chris Conley to the Chiefs. I'm not 100% in love with him. You know, now you're sort of getting that French territory. Sammy Coates will probably be a beast because he went to Pittsburgh. It's... Ty Montgomery went to the Packers. He'll be a beast in 3 years. I mean, you skipped on all of this talent at wide receiver. You waited all the way until then. I understand that it's a deep wide receiver class, but if it is your #1 priority in a deep receiver class, you can skip. You don't have to spend the number 12 overall pick, but you have 2 first. You spend one of them on the biggest need on your team. That's just what you do. You don't go because you need a backup for Alex Mack. This is not what you do. So the Cleveland Browns, I'm sorry, you went 7-9, and you will probably go 4-12. So I don't know what quarterbacks are coming out next year, but I'm guessing they're going for that, and in their second round pick, they'll take a wide receiver. Maybe. Knowing them, they'd take a wide receiver second overall, because that's what the Cleveland Browns do. Okay, so now, let's have a little bit more fun. Let's look at the 5 teams who I think got better, basically did their jobs in this draft. Now, at number 5, this is where it's a little tricky. I have the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, you're not going to have a huge improvement over last season. But what a lot of people would clamor about is they didn't take a running back. And I think they should have taken a shot at one maybe in the 3rd or 4th round, but they believe that it was their offensive line and not necessarily DeMarco Murray that led to their rushing success last season. We can only guess later. You know, right now it's either say, oh, you needed to get a running back. Maybe something happens with Darren McFadden. Maybe one of the other guys on the roster does something. I mean, they can easily do running back by committee if they want to. They probably did just run DeMarco Murray into the ground because it was a contract year and they weren't going to re-sign him. Who knows? But I like their other picks. I like Byron Jones in the 1st round. They needed a cornerback. They needed defense. That's what they needed. With their 2nd pick, they grabbed Randy Gregory, who was one of the top 10 players in this draft. But because of the pot thing, basically because of Josh Gordon, everyone was passing on him. The Cowboys are one of the teams, number 1, where Jerry doesn't care. He says he learned his lesson with Randy Moss and he's going to take these guys. That's why they have Des Bryant. That's why they signed some of these other guys. I think they had Tank Johnson at one point. They go and they draft these guys who are, have difficulties because they have a program in place to help these guys get their life back on track. Now, Randy Gregory is saying all the right things in saying that he's telling everyone he's immature and he needs a structured program. And if he is genuinely looking for that, then the Cowboys, they're a pretty good place to go. So I love that they get a great edge rusher. They can pair him up with Greg Hardy whenever the hell he comes back. Their 3rd round pick, they grab an offensive tackle. Everyone can sort of make jokes, but Doug Free, he's 31. They lost their swing tackler in offensive, in free agency. So anyone gets injured, they don't really have a good backup plan. So a 3rd round pick on an offensive tackle, a position where if you look at the Eagles last season, you look at what happened to the Browns, you need some depth. And if you're spending it in the 3rd round for an already talented team, you go for it, you do you. 4th round, they grab an inside linebacker. He might have the potential to play. DN in the 5th round, offensive lineman, and then an offensive tackle, or outside linebacker, offensive tackle, and tight end in the 7th round. Those guys may or may not make the roster, but you never know. So I like what they did in general. They went for needs and value at the same time, and that's exactly how you have to do it. If you need something, you go and get it. If it's a value, bonus. Otherwise, try and be smart. Be like, the Patriots or the Ravens. Trade back. If you think the guy's going to be there mid-2nd round and you're at the end of the 1st, trade back 10 spots. More likely, he's going to be there and you'll get some assets in the process. If you want to draft for value and need, that's the way to do it. Number 4 on my list is the New York Jets. Now, I think they could have a 3-game improvement, but they weren't very good, so I don't think they crack 8-8 this season. I think 8-8 is best case scenario, but it's not. I don't think that's guarantee. Now, Leonard Williams was a value pick at number 6. He wasn't a pressing need, but in that scenario with a player like that, who many think is the best in the draft, and the Jets generally improve their roster through free agency. They made some pretty good signings. I mean, I don't think they're going to win because of the quarterback issue, but at number 6, you're not getting a quarterback. Take Leonard Williams. He's good for value. Whether or not you want to keep him, Sheldon Richardson, and Muhammad Wilkerson, or trade Wilkerson off, it doesn't matter. You got him. We all know what Todd Bowles loves to do in Arizona with Calais Campbell. So have that 3-man wrecking crew. Let him just go. They will make the rest of the defense that much better, and the defense is already pretty good. So I like that pick. Devin Smith in the 2nd round at wide receiver. I like that because they need to put as many weapons around whoever's at quarterback as possible. Their offensive line is already pretty decent. A couple of the guys are getting up there in age. You might have to address that eventually, but I like that. Lorenzo Malden, the linebacker from Louisville in the 3rd round. I mean, it just makes sense. You've got a lot of old guys playing outside linebacker for them. So if you think he can come in and be an edge rusher for you, then you take him because that's one thing he never had in Arizona. In their 4th round pick, they grab Bryce Petty, who I honestly thought was going to go in the 2nd round. They grab him in the 4th. If he wins your starting quarterback job this season, then that just tells you how bad the quarterback situation is. Preferably, he should sit for 2 years. One if he's lucky, but 2 years most likely is where they should go. Offensive guard with the 5th round. Again, add some depth there. 7th rounder, you got a D tackle. I'm not going to rule him out because you just never know with defensive lineman with Todd Bowles. So I like what the Jets did in general. They addressed quarterback the best way they could, but they did it properly. They drafted him in the 4th round, so if next season, once again, they're in the top 3 and they get their hands on one of the top quarterback prospects, they don't have to feel obligated to start Bryce Petty. And the rest of the guys on the roster, cut them loose if you have to. Number 3 is the team with the 1st overall pick this year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, again, like I said, Jameis Winston, I think any of these guys could be busts very easily. I don't think he's a standout. I think with him, it's more so the off-field stuff that everyone keeps harping on, which may or may not get him into more trouble. Ben Roethlisberger succeeded, and he was pretty immature at one point, and he's borderline Hall of Famer. So, hopefully he can work through that, get the right structure around him, although I don't think that's Lovie Smith. But what I really like is with their 2nd round pick, they grabbed an offensive tackle who's going to come right in and start. And they traded back up with the Colts into the 2nd round to grab Ali Marpet, who I'm waiting for Chris Berman to talk about going on a magic Marpet ride. You just know that's a Chris Berman nickname. So they grab a guard, help the interior of that offensive line. They put that around him. He's already got a lot of playmakers. Assume if you like Doug Martin, that is. I don't, but at least he's a bell cow. You can hand him the ball 100 times. He might only get 55 yards on those 100 carries, but you can give it to him 100 times. 4th round they go after outside linebacker. 5th round they grab another wide receiver, and in the 6th round, and in the 7th round they grab another running back. So generally I like what they did. I mean, again, like I said, 3-game improvement is where I'm going. That makes them 5-11. So it's not like I have high hopes for this team, but if they could push to 6-10, I mean, 4-game turnaround is pretty good if they can get to 6-10. But this is all dependent on what Jameis Winston does. And I would still like for the Bills to go after Mike Glennon. I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be nice. And I do think with the Tampa Bay situation, Jameis Winston is going to have to compete for that job. It's probably not going to be as open as it should be, but I think if Mike Glennon performs well, they'll be perfectly fine letting Jameis sort of sit until Glennon screws it up and they have to put Jameis Winston in. Plus, Lovie Smith doesn't like Mike Glennon. Never mind, I take that all back. The number 2 pick, or the number 2 team I liked, was the team with number 4 overall pick, the Oakland Raiders. And this is very simple. I'm looking at this draft, and of their 1st round through 5th round picks, I think any of these guys could be the starter on this team. Amari Cooper is exactly who they needed to help out Derek Carr, give him a true number 1 receiver. I don't understand the release of James Jones after this pick. They already had $25 million in cap space. You might as well just keep him. He only saves you like $3 million. Their number 2 pick, they grab a defensive end. Add as much as you can to that front 7 because that is going to be your bread and butter. The 3rd round pick, they grab Clive Walford, the tight end. He may or may not start, but if he sits for a year or 2, he could be somebody you got to keep an eye on later on. And if not, he could find his way into 2 tight end sets, depending on how the rest of that depth chart falls. Joe Feliciano at offensive guard in the 4th round. Again, the Raiders have a passable offensive line, but not a good or great offensive line. So, I guess out of all of this, he might be the one who's least likely to start. Oh no, I take that back. I just looked at their other 5th round pick and just did the math in my head. So he has a pretty decent chance to start, maybe, or at least he can add some depth and be the first man up if someone goes down. Their first 5th round pick, they grab Ben Heaney, the inside linebacker. It doesn't hurt to add more linebackers there. And saying that, their next 5th round pick is Neron Bell, the outside linebacker from Florida. You've already got C.O. Moore and Khalil Mack. He's probably not going to see any play. 6th round pick, they grabbed an inside linebacker again. That's probably just for some depth. And then, a tackle, a wide receiver, and a cornerback in the 7th rounds. Most teams, they might not make the roster, but you might as well take a shot here. And the best draft out of any of these teams. Now, there are a lot of teams that had pretty good drafts. It's hard for me to make this list and look at it and not see the Cardinals on this list, but, as good as the draft the Cardinals might have had, I thought the Falcons got better. A lot of these teams got better, but I think the team that will be most benefited by their incoming class, all things considered by who they didn't trade, is the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you're assuming that Adrian Peterson starts for them again, then they went out and they grabbed a cornerback, the best cornerback in the draft. They got their hands on him with the 11th pick, which they need another cornerback. So, perfect. You address a need. Your second-round pick, you grab Eric Kendricks, arguably the best inside linebacker in this draft, and inside linebacker might be their biggest need on this team, outside of offensive line. Your third-round pick, you grab a defensive end, Daniel Hunter, because Everson Griffin, they sort of saw it coming that he was going to have a breakout season. No one else did, but they saw it, and that's all that matters. But your other side, you have Brian Robinson, who's 32. So even if Hunter just sits on the bench for a year, sort of comes in situational downs, and then develops into a starting defensive end opposite Griffin, it works. Fourth round, you got TJ Clemmings. Their offensive line is terrible. They have so much invested in Matt Khalil. And it's hard for you to immediately say, hey, you were our guy last season. Well, we're going to replace you already. They should, but you got to give him at least one more season, I guess. I think they picked up his fifth-year option, too, which, hey, well, whatever. They can replace him. Their first fifth-round pick, they went and grabbed a tight end and McCoy Pruitt. It's not a pressing need for them, but grabbing some depth. Their second fifth-round pick, they grabbed Stefan Diggs, a wide receiver from Maryland. He could see some play as maybe a third wide receiver. You know, they grabbed Mike Wallace, but how much do you really believe in Mike Wallace? He's shooting his mouth off now saying he's the fastest player in the NFL. Yeah, okay. That's just how quickly you ran out of Miami. Good job. Sixth round, they grab a tackle and another defensive end. Seventh round, they grab another tackle and then an outside linebacker. So overall, adding some depth, but more importantly, hitting their needs. Getting decent value with their second-round pick. You can say that Trey Wayne is a little bit of a reach, but he's the best cornerback in this draft. You don't want to take the risk, because if you trade down to 13 or 14, because he's probably projected as like the 15, 16 player, someone else will probably snatch him up and take him. So I think at that point, you take the risk, and you know that you got depth at any other position you might want to grab. And with Adrian Peterson back, and that'll be another big thing for them, I seriously think the Vikings, I don't think they're the dark horse, because I think they're going to be a lot of people's dark horse. I think they can make the playoffs. I really do, because I think the NFC is so top-heavy, and I think the Lions are going to fall off the face of the planet. I think they're going 6-10 next year. I had them down as one of my teams that didn't get better. So I think the Lions are going to fall off a cliff, and that's going to open the door for the Vikings. I don't know what's going to happen with the Eagles. The Eagles could have blown this up and just go 8-8 next season. You know, so I do think the Vikings could be the team that sneaks in there and contends for a playoff spot. I don't think they go after the Packers for the division just yet, but a 10-6 season and getting the 6th seed, I can see it happening. So those are my winners and, I guess, losers from this draft. Now, real quick, I'll run through the other teams, just so you know what I liked and what I didn't like. Now, teams that I did like, I already said the Cardinals I liked. I liked what the Falcons did. I liked what the Ravens did, but again, the Ravens, the Ravens, Packers, and Patriots, they're always going to be winners because it doesn't matter who they took. They know what they're doing. Leave them be. They're just going to go on my winners list every single year until the management changes. I thought the Bears had a good draft. I thought the Broncos, I mean, they got good value. So I thought that was good. I liked the Texans draft a lot. I liked what Jacksonville did, even though they didn't make it. I was honestly considering putting the entire top 4 in, or who was the 5th? I almost put I think the entire top 5 outside of Tennessee I would put in there. And Tennessee, it's just because they didn't trade for Phillip Rivers or something like that. I thought the Chiefs did well, even though they didn't address their wide receiver need as soon as I would have liked. I thought Miami did really well. Rams, I just don't understand the drafting of like the 7th best quarterback in the 3rd round, and he was the 3rd quarterback off the board. I don't understand it. The Giants did really well. The Steelers did well. The Chargers getting Melvin Gordon. They traded up and spent a lot to go up 2 picks for him, but if you really thought that Houston was going to take him, that's their biggest need, I think, on the offensive side besides center, so I think that was good for them. I thought the Seahawks did pretty well, even though I think they spent way too much on Tyler Lockett. And yeah, again, I think the Redskins did really well. You might not be sold as Scherf as a 5th overall pick, but their offensive line was abysmal, so if you think the difference, he was going to go number 7, 8, 9. So you might as well grab him then. Teams that I didn't think did well, I mean, you already heard 5 of them. The other 5, I didn't like what the Bengals did. I just don't understand. I get maybe taking one of those tackles, but why do you spend both of your first 2 picks on offensive tackle? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't think the Lions did enough to fill in their gaping holes. I really don't. Again, you would think that with the offensive talent they have, that losing your 2 best defensive tackles and basically your 2 best players on that defense, well, maybe not the 2 best, but you would think that losing them with that offense, you should be fine. But as they showed last season, even with a healthy Calvin Johnson, Jim Caldwell just has that team all messed up and they don't know what the hell they're doing. I didn't think the Saints did very well in their draft. I think they had more pressing needs than what they went after. I don't know about Garrett Grayson in the 3rd round. Again, they must have a long-term plan, but I've always been higher on... I always put Grayson as the number 5 quarterback in this draft. You know, I don't think the Eagles did very well, and I don't think the 49ers had a very good draft considering they should have taken a middle linebacker considering 2 of their top 3 retired. And they didn't draft a single one. They literally drafted Eric Armstead because everyone's just assuming Justin Smith is going to retire. But you already brought in Darnell Dockett for that. I mean, I know he's not a long-term option, but I think inside linebacker is a more pressing need. But I get it. If they think Eric Armstead's good, that's fine. But at 14 in the 2nd round, they probably could have gone after one of the inside linebacker prospects. So those are my winners and losers. The teams I thought that got better, the teams that I thought got worse. That's what I thought of the draft this year. Again, I'm not going to do pick-by-pick analysis. I'm not going to give them grades because you can't give them grades that you don't know. Half of these guys could be busts. I mean, this could be one of the worst drafts you've ever seen. You don't know. So until then, this is what I thought immediately about the impact on their roster now. I don't care about 5 years from now. I care about right now. Did they do well? So, thank you guys for listening. I meant to have this up earlier in the week. I got busy, so that didn't happen. The next podcast, I'm probably going to take the next couple of weeks off and then do one. And then even when I do that, I'm just going to review the entirety of the offseason. It's going to be an offseason review pod. And then after that, I'm taking a couple months off. I'll probably come back late June, early July. So expect that next podcast up. 27th is the Wednesday that week. So 27th, 28th, depending on when I get to film it. Oh wait, I'm on vacation that week. That might actually come earlier in that week. So expect that during then. And then after that, it'll be a couple of months. But check out illegalshiftnfl.com because I will still be updating that during my hiatus from this podcast. So if you want to see more of my opinions, I'll probably do more long-form pieces so I'm not doing 5-hour episodes. Although I might do preview podcasts if I feel like it's easier to do it that way as opposed to writing an article. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for listening. Please be sure to leave a comment down below. Be sure to like this video. Share it with your friends. Let them know. I appreciate the feedback that I'm getting on these podcasts. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. I'm glad that people are asking for it. And thank you guys for sticking through me, just rambling for the most part. I really do have a lot of fun doing this. Trust me, I'm not taking a vacation from this over the summer because I don't enjoy doing this or anything. It's that this is the end of the NFL season now. Like, this is officially, the draft happened, we're done. I'm going to give it a couple weeks to do my full offseason wrap-up because you got to figure some guys are going to get released. There might be a couple trades coming up. You never know. Anything other than that, it'll be small news. It's not going to be worth doing a podcast over something happening. I mean, Ed Reed retired yesterday. I'm not talking about it now because I thought he already retired. He didn't play it all last season, so it's sort of a I just assumed he was already gone. But I do think he and Troy Polamalu are both first ballot Hall of Famers in the top 10 safeties at least to ever play the game. And whether or not you want to debate between him and Polamalu, I'll take Ed Reed. I like Polamalu's hair better, but Ed Reed was more consistent from the beginning to the end of his career. So I'll take him. So, with that said, answer the question of the day, which I don't think I've come up with yet. And thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you guys in a couple of weeks.